أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا وحبيبنا حبيب إله العالمين محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. Inshallah, we continue with our discussion about the meaning of ta'wil. Last night, what we discussed was that ta'wil sometimes is related to ta'wil al-ru'ya, the interpretation of dreams. Someone is related to ta'wil al-amal, the interpretation of acts or the meaning of acts. And sometimes is related to interpretation of a speech, what people say or what we read, the ta'wil of it. And especially we want to talk about ta'wil of the verses of the Qur'an and the meaning of it. And also we have another concept which is zahir and batin, the interior and the exterior meaning of any statement, and especially now about the Qur'an. Before I mention what A'imma alayhimu salam have said about ta'wil, I would like to bring to your attention one opinion which is very famous, the opinion of those mystics who see the Quran as the source of their inspiration. And this opinion is explained by Muhyiddin ibn Arabi and also by his students in Kashf al-Asrar fi Tafsir al-Quran. What they say is that tafsir and ta'wil are two different things. Tafsir is what you read in the Quran, you explain, and we have books of tafsir. You read the Quran, the mufassir or the interpreter, the exegete explains it for you, explain its terms, its context, the sababun nuzul, the cause of revelation, the history of it, all these things he explains. The terminology, the i'rab or grammar, everything that they explain is tafsir. But ta'wil is something different. When you recite a verse, suddenly a meaning comes into your heart and you grasp some knowledge which you didn't previously have. And necessarily that knowledge may not be very much related to the verse that you are reading, but it comes to your heart. It is not unrelated, but it is something different, much, much deeper. This is batin, and this is ta'wil of the verse. And therefore, when we talk about tanzil and ta'wil, revelation and interpretation, interpretation is related to the heart of the human being who recites the Quran. Some meaning is inspired into the heart. Now, what I think is that this is not the ta'wil that we are talking about. This is something which Allah graces the reciters of the Quran with it if they are pure and if they wholeheartedly pay attention. Now, we have a hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, who said, Al-Qur'anu ala arba'at ashya'. The Quran is based on four things or four layers. Ala al-ibara wal-ishara wal-lata'if wal-haqa'iq. It has an ibara, which is the expression. That's what you recite. There is a meaning. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَقَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ. We sent Nuh to his people and he said, "O people, worship God." This is quite clear. The tafsir of it is very clear. We know who Nuh was. We know what is the meaning of irsal and all these things. This is ibara. But then there is some ishara in this as well. Ishara is what is indications. Is something which is implied by this, but not as part of the meaning of the statement. How merciful Allah is to send someone like Nuh to such transgressors, to such people of unthankfulness. They were quite ungrateful, quite unthankful to God. Still, God didn't leave them. He sent someone like Nuh to them. This is an ishara. We have to somehow think deeply about it to find out that although this talks about the story of Nuh, but it gives us another implication. It indicates to us the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An honorable man like Nuh, Salamun ala Nuhin fil alameen, when Allah talks about Nuh, may the greeting be on Nuh over the whole history of mankind because of what he did. And this great honorable man, he sent to the most vicious people. إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمًا فَاسِقِينَ. They were very vicious, they were transgressors. And still, because of his mercy, he sent Nuh to them. This is ishara. We have to grasp it by thinking over different aspects of it. Then there is lata'if. Now, lata'if cannot be explained. Lata'if are subtle meanings which only come through the grace of Allah to the heart. You recite this and suddenly a meaning about An'ibudullah comes to your heart. What is the meaning of ibadah? What was Nuh asking from his people? This cannot be explained. This only falls into the heart. This is lata'if. And then what is the exact intended meaning of this verse? This is haqiqa. This is the intended meaning, reality. Then the Imam alayhi salam said, فَالْعِبَارَةُ لِلْعَوَامِ. Ibara, expression, is for general public, for everyone. They read the Quran and they only understand this ibara. And they get reward over it. Don't think that they don't get any reward or they don't get any benefit. Yes, of course they get benefit. But وَالْإِشَارَةُ لِلْخَوَاصِ. Ishara, those indications which point to certain concepts that can be understood from the verse. This is for the elite, those who ponder on these verses, those who ponder on everything, detect signs of Allah in everything and in the Quran. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْمُتَوَسِّمِينَ. In that there are signs for those who detect signs. Not everyone detects signs. It's only the elite who detect these signs. This is ishara. وَاللَّطَائِفِ لِلْأَوْلِيَاءِ. Now it moves higher. Those subtle meanings that Allah inspires into the heart whenever you recite the Quran. This is for awliya, for his friends. For his friends who have dedicated themselves to him and he has dedicated his ghaib to them. It comes to their hearts. It makes them more humble. The more they recite the Quran, the more humble they become. The more meaning they grasp. Of course, we can say this is from batin. However, it is something which is only inspired to the heart. This is nothing to do with ta'wil. And haqa'iq, yes, the haqa'iq is ta'wil lil anbiya. Anbiya and their awsiya, of course, prophets and their successors, those who succeed them in knowledge, their heirs, the warithun nabi. This is for them, this haqa'iq. They know the ta'wil, they know the intended meaning, and of course all these other layers are included in that. So, what Ibn Arabi mentions and his students, that ta'wil is those meanings which fall into the heart when the awliya recite the Quran, is not according to what we are discussing or what A'imma alayhimus salam mentioned, is not the ta'wil of the Quran. And this is not what we call the battle for ta'wil. We said Kerbela is battle for ta'wil. This is not of the sort. One other meaning for ta'wil is mentioned by Allama Tabatabai. He is unique in this. He says that ta'wil is a reality not that these verses allude to, but that these verses originate from it. There is a book, which is the haqiqah, is reality, and from that book has been translated into language, human language, into concepts. These concepts, of course, correspond to that, but no one can understand it except al-mutahharun. Why he says this? He says that Allah mentions that إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. We have made this an Arabic Quran. Now, Arabian is not something which is meant, the Arabic language. It means we have made it into your language. It could have been in Arabic or Farsi or English or whatever. It happened to be in Arabic. It means we actually dressed it with concepts for which you could use words. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. Why we did this? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Because other than that, you couldn't think about it. You couldn't ponder on this. You couldn't understand it. However, don't think that this is the Quran. وَإِنَّهُ فِي أُمِّ الْكِتَابِ لَدَيْنَا لَعَلِيٌّ حَكِيمٌ. That book, which we made into Arabic language, with us, is very high, full of wisdom, and only those who have certain wisdom can touch it. And then he mentions other verses in the Quran, like, for example, in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ إِنَّهُ لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ فِي كِتَابٍ مَكْنُونٍ لَا يَمَسُّهُ إِلَّا الْمُطَهَّرُونَ. This book that you see, which is in Arabic, and you read it, it is لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ, a very honorable recitation. It is in a sealed book, it is a concealed book. No one has access to that, إِلَّا الْمُطَهَّرُونَ, unless the purified. Then Allah Ta'ala says, yes, the purified ones have access to that, and that is the ta'wil of this. Whatever we read this here, there's a ta'wil of it in that book, and actually this is a translation of that into language. وَإِنَّمَا يَسَّرْنَاهُ بِلِسَانِكَ. We made it easy with your tongue. How we made it easy? Of course, those I don't know what to say, because I can't say meaning, I can't say concept, because they only find meaning and concept when it comes to in language. It is beyond meaning and concept. Those realities no one could grasp unless that you grasp them, and through you I made it into language, and then you give it to people. So he says that is the ta'wil of this. Now, if someone have access to that book, if someone has access to that book, he certainly doesn't look only into the expressions and words. He finds at every time, in every incident, in every occasion, and in every event, they find the meaning of it according to the context and situation. And they give a different meaning to you at every time. And that's why A'imma alayhimus salam gave a different meaning of ta'wil. The meaning of ta'wil, according to them, was that the one who knows the ta'wil at every time, in every occasion, can tell you what is the right course of action through the Quran, because this Quran contains everything. But contains everything not in its tanzil, it contains everything in its ta'wil. And that's why A'imma alayhimus salam said, we know everything through the Quran, by the Quran. But of course, we go through the Quran, we see it's just some history of the past people, certain sort of laws which may be out of context now, and certain exhortations commands, prohibitions. This is what we find in the Quran. Of course, the more we purify, the more of those lata'if come into our hearts. That's a different issue. But they said, whatever we know is from the Quran. There is no knowledge beyond the Quran. That has come from that book. Now look how the Imam alayhi salam explains. This is in Tafsir al-Ayyashi, which is probably the best tafsir based on tradition, better than Tafsir al-Qummi and Tafsir al-Thaqalain and other tafasir. عن فضيل بن يسار قال سألت أبا جعفر عليه السلام عن هذه الرواية. I asked Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam about this riwayah which has come through different sources from the Prophet. ما في القرآن آية إلا ولها ظهر وباطن. There is no verse in the Quran unless there is an exterior and interior. There is a zahir, there is a batin to it. وَمَا فِيهِ حَرْفٌ. There is no letter in the Quran. Now this is taking things to very extreme, isn't it? مَا فِيهِ حَرْفٌ إِلَّا وَلَهُ حَدٌّ. There is a limit and boundary for it. And for that limit and boundary, there is a beginning. You know when that beginning should start, which changes the meaning of this verse to a different thing. وَلِكُلِّ حَدٍّ مَطْلَعٍ. Now, of course, this is very complicated. However, what he's asking is, what is the meaning of ظَهْرٌ وَبَاطٍ? مَا يَعْنِي بِقَوْلِهِ ظَهْرٌ وَبَاطٍ? He said, ظَهْرُهُ تَنْزِيلُهُ. When we talk about ظَهْر or ظَاهِر or exterior, it means the tanzil of the Quran, the revelation, the expressions that we read. وَبَطْنُهُ تَأْوِيلُهُ. And the interior is the ta'wil. مِنْهُ مَا مَضَى وَمِنْهُ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ بَعْدٍ. This Quran was revealed 1400 years ago, but there are some verses in the Quran which have not yet been realized. It belongs to the future. This is what it says. There are some parts of it which have been already realized and some parts which have not yet been realized. Some parts of what? Some batn, some ta'wil. Some ta'wil have been already realized, some haven't been realized. It has to come to existence yet. يَجْرِي كَمَا يَجْرِ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرِ. And this ta'wil goes on as the moon and sun goes on. كُلَّمَا جَاءَ مِنْهُ شَيْءٌ وَقَعَ. Whenever the time for one ta'wil comes, it happens. And actually, the Imam said, we know this ta'wil. And in this way, the Quran is perpetual, is continuously in use, fresh, by this ta'wil. And we had a question the other night that, do we really, can we really rely on a text which has been revealed 1400 years ago? There are, of course, expressions which are very general. We take lessons from it, from the past history. There is information about future, about hereafter. However, when it comes to human life on the earth, there is a ta'wil which is ongoing. And therefore, this Quran needs an interpreter. As I said, there are two approaches to Quran. One say the Quran, Hasbuna Kitabullah, is enough. We don't need an interpreter for it. We interpret it ourselves. Now, the hazard of this approach is that how can we make sure that we are interpreting it in the right way? The other approach is that no, this Quran needs a partner. إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمُ الثَّقْلَيْنِ. I am leaving with you two things. إِنَّهُمَا لَنْ يَفْتَرَقَا. You cannot part them from each other. You cannot separate them from each other. So that interpreter should be there. And that interpreter gives the ta'wil at every time and fights for the right ta'wil, because he knows what is the meaning of the Quran and what course of action should be taken, and fights for that ta'wil. In Tafsir al-Ayyashi, again from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says, ولو أن الآية إذا نزلت في قوم ثم مات أولئك القوم ماتت الآية لما بقي من القرآن شيء. If Quran was revealed about a group of people and that group of people passed away, and the ayah would be irrelevant after they die, then nothing of Quran would be useful. And this is usually what we see. For example, we seek the history, the occasion of revelation, and say that, well, this ayah was revealed about this man, about this people. And especially there are some exegetes who emphasize and insist that you shouldn't generalize. This is about those people. Imam says, if this is the case, then the Quran would die. لما بقي من القرآن شيء ولكن القرآن يجري أوله على آخره ما دامت السماوات والأرض. All the verses, from the beginning to the end, it flows and continuously find context as long as the heavens and earth persist, are preserved. وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ آيَةٌ. For every people there is an ayah in the Quran. This is very interesting, but we don't know it. We recite the Quran, we don't know that this verse which is talking about Thamud is actually quite relevant to us. It's not talking about Thamud now, because Thamud has died several thousand years ago. It talks about us, we don't realize it. وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ آيَةٌ يَتْلُونَهَا هُمْ مِنْهَا مِنْ خَيْرٍ أَوْ شَرٍ. Now, good or evil, every people have some verses in the Quran that when they read it refers to them. They may not realize. رُبَّ تَالِ الْقُرْآنِ وَالْقُرْآنُ يَلْعَنُهُ. How many reciters of the Quran we have that the Quran curses them? How it curses them? It says, أَلَا لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. Isn't it? Beware, the curse of Allah is on oppressors, on wrongdoers, on zalimeen. Now, we are one of the zalimeen. We don't know. We don't realize ourselves. And we recite, أَلَا لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. And Quran says, yes, that's true. It's on you. It's on you. لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. Or any other thing which we may recite. However, who can say this? Because then people dispute, debate, you are the zalim, not me, or he says, not you are the zalim, not me, and then these arguments go on. We need someone to give us this ta'wil. Now, there are examples for this which I would like to mention, inshallah, tomorrow night. And then one very major question is, now that the Imam is not with us, what? This is, of course, a major question. I tell you, I'm not wiser than you in this, but we try to discuss it, inshallah. This is a very difficult question, but we try to discuss it, inshallah, to find out what is our duty now that we don't have access to that second half of the revelation, the interpreter of the revelation who knows the ta'wil. So for these two traditions, inshallah, I will mention some examples tomorrow night, and we now turn to our conversation with history. There were two tabi'is. Tabi'i, or successor in English, is technically someone who did not see the Prophet but did see the companions of the Prophet. Companion, by definition, or Sahabi, is someone who saw the Prophet, not met the Prophet, saw the Prophet, maybe from a distance, while believing in him. This is the meaning of companion. And then, of course, there is this dispute that does this make a person immaculate, that they cannot do any wrong at all? We leave that discussion for now. Tabi'i is someone who follows a companion, taba'a, sahabiyan. And he is, of course, he or she is respected according to Muslim tradition. They are respected. Tabi'un are respected as companions are respected as well. Now I want to talk about two tabi'is who both of them came across Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but made very different decisions. It's very interesting. They had almost the same background, almost the same type of life, but they made two different decisions. And the reason, I think, is if we go into the history of the lives of these two people, we find that yes, one of them deserved to be part of this epic of Kerbela, and the other one did not deserve it. It's usually what we do in our life has a bearing on our decisions that we make in every moment. This is what Quran clearly mentions. You do evil, you make evil decisions. You do good, you make good decisions. And this is the meaning of idlal and hidayah. Allah guides or misguides. Because if you are evil, Allah wouldn't like to give you His address. Isn't it? You want to go and meet Him. You want to go close to Him. If you are evil, He wouldn't give you His address. So you are misguided. If you are good, He gives you His address. And you find Him. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive for in our way, we will guide them to come to us. We give them our address to come. One of these men is Ubaydullah ibn Hurr al-Ju'fi, and the other one is Zuhair ibn al-Qin al-Bajali. Two different tribes. However, the same inclinations, the same life history. Both of them were staunch supporters of Uthman. And in the fitna which was created at the time of Uthman, when some companions came and wanted to kill Uthman, they supported Uthman, both of them. And one of them, because of this, he thought that I'm supporting Uthman. He joined the army, the troops of Muawiyah, and fought against Ali, peace be on him. Ubaydullah ibn Hurr al-Ju'fi. The other one, he just said, I don't want to get involved in this. He just went for his own life. Although he was a very, very huge commander, Zuhair ibn al-Qin, he didn't join Muawiyah or Ali, but he was a supporter of Uthman. Very interestingly, actually these two people didn't come across Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein alayhi salam went for them, both of them. But he said different things to them. It's very interesting. Both of them were running away from Imam Hussein. Now, I said that at his time, Imam Hussein was regarded to be the most honorable Muslim. That is why these men who were supporters of Uthman and away from Ahlul Bayt, despite that they didn't have any allegiance or any attachment to Hussein alayhi salam, they respected him. That is why they didn't want to face him and they didn't want to fight him. Now, Ubaydullah ibn al-Hurr al-Ju'fi was in Kufa after the Siffin finished, and he stayed in Sham for several years. Then he came back to Kufa and he stayed there. When he heard Hussein alayhi salam is coming to Kufa, he set out. He said, I don't want to face Hussein alayhi salam. He may ask me help. he may ask help from me. So I don't want to help, I don't want to get involved. He came out of Kufa. He was very wealthy man, a very famous commander. And if he stayed in Kufa, of course, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad would have asked him to go to the battle. He didn't want to, he came out. Zuhair ibn al-Qin, which of course all of you know, had performed Hajj and was coming back to Kufa. However, he knew that if he meets Hussein alayhi salam, he would ask him to join him. So he kept apart. Although they were actually traveling simultaneously, but the reports, Abu Mikhnaf says that Zuhair was trying to camp in the stations when Hussein had left or before Hussein had arrived. So he didn't want to face Hussein alayhi salam because he didn't want Hussein come and say him anything. Now, eventually both these men had to face Hussein alayhi salam. With respect to Zuhair, he in one of the stations, he had no choice but to camp for a part of the time that Imam had camped as well. He had no other choice. It was not possible for him to run away. So in that very short time, Imam sent two men of his own tribe, Hajjaj ibn Mas'ud, Hajjaj ibn Masruq Hajjaj ibn Masruq was sent to Ubaydullah ibn Hur. Two other people to his own, of his own tribe to him, and to Ubaydullah of his own tribe. He sent Hajjaj ibn Masruq, who was his mu'adhin and was killed in Kerbela, and Yazid ibn Mughaffal. Both of them were sent to Ubaydullah ibn Hur, and another delegation to Zuhair. Now, when the delegation went to Zuhair, he had camped in a distance. When he came in and said, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein wants to meet you, Abu Mikhnaf says, Abu Mikhnaf has first-hand account of Kerbala. That's why his account is the most reliable. And Sheikh Mufid reports from him, Tabari reports from him. He actually, in this occasion, he reports first-hand from Zuhair's wife. First-hand from Zuhair's wife, he reports. He says that Abu Mikhnaf says, when this messenger of Hussein came, they were eating. And as the messenger said, I have come from Hussein's side, and Hussein wants to meet you, he says that كَأَنَّ عَلَى رُؤُوسِنَا الطَّيْرِ, we were just motionless as there was a bird on our head. Motionless. We didn't know what Zuhair is going to say now. We didn't know. And then Dilham, the wife of Zuhair, as I said, Abu Mikhnaf reports from wife of Zuhair directly. He says, Dilham told me that I told Zuhair what would be the problem if you go and meet Hussein and see what he says. It's very bad if someone like Hussein, some respectful person like Hussein, calls you and you don't go. Zuhair said, no, I don't want to go. She insisted. And Zuhair said, okay. And he went. He went there and came back completely changed. As I said, this was a man who was a supporter of Uthman. Completely changed. And he said to his companions, of course these important people always had a big entourage with them, that I want to join Hussein. Any one of you who want to join me, you can join. Otherwise you go, you are all free. With regards to Ubaydullah ibn Hur, he I will tell you what happened to him. It is very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, these are lessons from history. When he was called to Hussein alayhi salam, he didn't go. So Hussein himself came to him, came to his tent in Qasr Bani Maqatil. It was just one station to Kerbela, the last station. He was camping there, going out of Kufa. Imam alayhi salam told him that إن عليك ذنوبا كثيرة, because he had fought for useless purposes all his life, and eventually he joined Mukhtar, and then he fought against Mukhtar, he fought against Mus'ab. It was all in fighting. Imam alayhi salam said, إن عليك ذنوبا كثيرة, you have lots of sins. فهل لك من توبة تمحي بها ذنوبك? Do you want a tawbah that all your sins will be forgiven? This is amazing. I mean, Imam is talking to someone who has been his enemy all the time, but he's a respected man. فَهَلْ لَكَ مِنْ تَوْبَةٍ تُمْحِي بَهَا ذُنُوبَكَ? Do you want a tawbah to just wash all your sins? He said, Ya Hussein, I don't want to get involved in this. However, I have a horse, which I'm a man of battles. Whenever battle went wrong and I was entangled, this horse saved me. This horse saved me. And I give this horse to you. There is no price for this horse. I give it to you. If, God forbid, something happened and you wanted to run away from the battle, this is the horse. Now you laugh because it's really something like a joke for Hussein alayhi salam. You see the mentality. He thinks that Hussein is going to fight for worldly things, and he says, you can run away with this horse. Hussein alayhi salam said, ما كنت متخذ المضلين عضدا, the verse of the Quran. I'm not going to take the misguided as my helper. I just wanted to help you. Now, you gave me a good advice. You wanted to give me this horse. أنصحك كما نصحتني. You gave me a nasiha, I give you one nasiha. You wanted good for me by giving me this horse. I want good for you, I give you one nasiha. Get away from here as far as you can. إن استطعت ألا تسمع صراخنا ولا تشهد وقعتنا فافعل. If you manage to get far from here so that you do not listen, do not hear when I call for help, and do not witness what we are going to go through, do this. Because لا يسمع واعيتنا أحد ولا ينصرنا إلا أكبه الله في النار. No one would hear the voice when I call for help and does not help unless he will go to hell. So you get away from here. And he did. This was a good nasiha Imam Hussein gave to him. That get away, get as far as you can, so that you do not witness and do not see and do not hear. Now this man, as I said, he fought many battles, and eventually he fought against Mus'ab ibn Zubayr in Kufa. And ironically, he was drowned in Furat. In that battle, he was drowned in Furat, the river where Imam Hussein could not take water from. He was drowned in that river. Now look at Zuhair. Zuhair came to his camp, and his companions, his entourage asked him, what happened? we never imagined that you would ever join Hussein. He said that Hussein reminded me of one thing, and that was when we were fighting in Lanjar, somewhere in Persia, with Salman. He was with us, we were fighting together. And we made a huge victory, and we were so happy. And lots of booties and these things. فَقَالَ لَنَا سَلْمَانَ أَفَرِحْتُمْ. Salman told us, are you happy for this? We said, yes, of course, this is big victory. He said, إِذَا أَدْرَكْتُمْ سَيَّدَ شَبَابَ آلِ مُحَمَّدْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامِ فَكُونُوا أَشَدَّ فَرَحًا بِقِتَالِكُمْ مَعَهُ مِمَّا عَصَبْتُمْ الْيَوْمِ مِنَ الْغَنَائِمِ. When you meet Sayyid Shabab Al Muhammad Hussein alayhi salam, when you meet him and you have the opportunity to fight on his side, you should be more happy than all these booties. And he said, Hussein reminded me of this. I had heard this from Salman, I had forgotten it. Now he reminded me, and he said, now, astawdu'ukumullah, assalamu alaikum, I go. And when he was fighting, you know, when on the night of Ashura, when Hussein alayhi salam said, you all are free to go, the first person from Ashab who spoke was Zuhair. He said that I wished I had 1,000 souls to give for you. And when he went to battle, the poems that he was using as he was bragging, usually it was quite common to brag when they went to battle, especially battles which were somehow hand-in-hand battles. He said, أنا زهير وأنا ابن القين أذودكم بالسيف عن حسين. I am Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. With my sword I keep you away from Hussein. إن حسينا أحد السبتين. Hussein is one of the grandsons of the Prophet. من إترة البر التقي الزين يا ليت نفسي قسمت قسمين. I wished my soul had torn apart of seeing what you are doing to the grandson of the Prophet. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. We now have some time for questions.
Thank you, Sheikh. Talking about the ayat of muhkamat ayat and mutashabihat ayat, is there a classification available, or how do ulama distinguish that this is muhkamat and mutashabihat? Would somebody else have? So, in other words, you may sort of say that, okay, this is muhkamat, and somebody else would say this is mutashabih. Is that possibility?
The definition is that a verse which cannot give but one meaning is muhkam. A verse which is dhu wujuh, can give you two meanings or more, is mutashabih. This is the definition. Now, then no one has classified this, but even some of the verses in which there is no dispute, one can find some other meanings. However, Allama Tabatabai, according to what he said, whether muhkam or mutashabih, they all have ta'wil. This is completely against all other mufassirun, because he said ta'wil is the reality of the book, and the book corresponds to it, whether muhkam or mutashabih.
Alaikum Shaykh. A question slightly diverging from the topic. You mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Nabi Nuh to the people that he sent them to, even though that they were transgressors. And the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that no prophet has ever suffered what I've suffered. I'm assuming he's referring back to his community. And the awaiting of the final Imam will come when the world is filled with total corruption, which he will fill with justice. Would you say that in this period of intidhar, as a community, then we're not exactly that bad because the Imam hasn't appeared?
I don't know ta'wil. I don't know ta'wil. Yeah, no comment.
حضرت
I think we have one question from ladies and then inshallah from gents. Yeah, sorry.
Question about the tafsir you recommended. Could you repeat the name? The tafsir?
Which one?
Yes.
Ayashi.
The
tafsir based on tradition.
yes.
Yeah, it's Tafsir al-Ayashi.
Do you know if it's been translated?
No, it's not, unfortunately, no.
Okay.
You have to learn Arabic. That's the meaning of it.
Thank you.
جناب حجت الاسلام بهمنی, you gave a definition for Sahabi and Tabi'i, the one who met the Prophet or saw him from distance. How do you then describe Uwais Qarani? He never met Prophet and not even from distance.
So he is not included in that definition. However, we may extend the definition to those who believed at the time of the Prophet but did not manage or didn't have the opportunity to meet him. We may include them in the definition of Sahabi. But the standard definition of Sahabi is Man ra'an nabi mu'minan bih, whoever saw the Prophet while he believed in him. This is the definition of the Sahabi. But of course, by extension, we can include people like Uwais al-Qaran.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam.
I understand you said the interpretation, that only the 12th Imam will have the real interpretation, yeah, 100%. How much of the interpretation do you think Agha Sistani has now? 20%, 30%, 60%? How much has he got it right? And my second question is, how much did Ayatollah Khomeini got the interpretation of the Quran? 50%, 60%? How much? What is the range?
Let us discuss this when we are, inshallah, struggling to find what is our option now that we don't have the Imam. Inshallah, we'll discuss it that time. Yeah. Of course, I cannot give you percentage or numbers, but inshallah, we'll try to find some sort of solution for it.
We'll have one more question.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Just when we were trying to see the difference between ta'wil and tafsir, the hidden meaning of the verse, something just struck me, and it said I had once heard somebody say a different meaning for a very simple verse, which is very commonly recited in one of the surahs, La tanfuzuna illa bisultan. So where would you put that ayah? Just for my reference, please. Where would you put that ayah?
La tanfuzuna illa bisultan is a mutashabih verse because it can carry different meanings. La tanfuzuna illa bisultan, you cannot pass through unless with sultan. Now, because sultan has different meanings. It may mean power, it may mean proof, a good argument, it may mean a handwritten thing given to you as a guarantee. So if we have a word which may mean different meanings, then the verse will become mutashabih, and we have to just give the possible meanings. You know, in tafsir we always deal with possible meanings, isn't it? Yeah.
The reason I ask is because somebody actually deciphered it as La tanfuzun illa bisultan means you cannot rise up except unless you push down on something. So he was trying to liken it to the likeness of a rocket maybe that goes up into space. So that's why I asked, is it possible that this might be a connotation?
I think, well, let me tell you something. I think instead of such imaginations and creative thinking, we better think to make those things rather than after they are made to think that these are alluding to. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. I think
Thank
we're on
you.
there. Salawat.